Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Hello and welcome to Phoenix Business Radio, broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studio inside Mac 6 Conscious Workspace in Tempe, Arizona, where we help build businesses and connect you with the right people. I am Phoenix Business Radio CEO Karen Loomis, and I am ecstatic to be on episode number 5 for this incredible series that we are doing together. Today's topic, Assimilation, the great whitewashing of African Americans. And this is part of our Racism in Small Business and the Arts series. And I want to welcome back to the studio Camilla Ross, who is with Emerson Theater Collaborative in Sedona. Welcome back, young lady.
Thank you, Karen. Good morning, everyone.
There's this rare presence about Camilla today. She's always a joy to have in the studio, but she's got this extra spunk about her today. So I'll just fair warning.
Beware. I've had no coffee.
And with Camilla is Karen Loomis with No Moss Brands. Karen, welcome back to the studio.
Thank you.
Oh, my goodness.
She's so prim and proper.
Yes, yeah. She has to temper it.
Because I'm trying to social media at the same time. Bad idea.
Well,
multitask.
We will, yes, trying to multitask. And then joining us also from, I believe, California, right, Terri?
Yes.
from
Menlo Park.
Yes, wonderful. That's Northern Cal, isn't it, Menlo?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Right near Stanford.
I grew up in Belmont.
Oh, awesome.
In Belmont Heights, yeah, up till I was about 13. Then we moved out here, and I love that area. Too cold for me. But also Arizona's too hot. So if I can just maybe land in San Diego or Carlsbad, I'd be good.
I had an elementary teacher from Menlo many, many moons ago. I remember.
Was she black?
No, it was a he.
Of course not.
Yeah, it was a he. Yeah.
We're going to talk about that.
We
are.
So let me finish our proper introduction. We have Terri Givens with the Center for Higher Education Leadership, and I would love for Karen to introduce her a little bit more robustly than I have just done that before we kick off our conversation.
So the beauty of today's conversation is that Terri and I have not had a conversation in probably 40 years or more. And I'm not even sure we had a conversation back then because we were track competitors. And so I think I probably knew the name Terri Givens more than I knew the person Terri Givens. But yet, the beauty of growing up together in a small city of Spokane, Washington, and while we didn't go to the exact same schools, once people hear that you're from Spokane and they hear there's another person from Spokane who's black, they immediately try to tiptoe around and say, hey, any chance you know Karen Loomis from Spokane?
You mean that's not your sister?
Yeah, right. And so the beauty of that was it was true. I did know her. And so as a matter of fact, then I start digging around in my brain. Oh my God, I couldn't figure out what school she went to and all this stuff. So, but what really intrigued me was I wanted the chance to see Terri's path from high school on, because obviously we have had the same, high school, all the way through graduation, that same education. But I wanted to see if her experience as an African-American through the education system, and she has a ton of experience in that world in the higher education and is doing a lot of work in that area as well on diversity, assimilation. And she's going to share some of her stories that often parallel some of mine, but just make sure that you understand that there are distinctions between the two families, but there are a lot of similarities when you look at it from a 30,000-foot level. So on that note, hello, Terri.
Hello.
Yes, that's a fun background from Karen's perspective. And before we kick it off and really get into the conversation, if you could just share, Terri, with us, who are you? What are you doing today professionally? And I have a sense it's going to kind of guide us a little bit backward into this conversation. And I know that you've got a book coming out too, which we're so ecstatic to be part of the crew that gets to share that news.
Yes.
Absolutely. So yes, I grew up in Spokane, Washington, and some of the commonalities, besides the fact that we ran track between Karen and I, is that we ended up in Spokane because of the military. My dad was in the Air Force, and so my parents landed in Spokane right before I was born. And so I was born in Spokane. We were there for about 3 years. And then we moved to Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan for a couple of years and then moved back to Spokane. And that's where my dad retired in 1972. So I grew up mostly in Spokane, and there's tons of stories, and I will refer people to the book because I tell a lot of these stories in the book Radical Empathy, Finding a Path to Bridging Racial Divides. It's available for pre-order on Amazon. But I think what's really interesting is that the reason Karen and I landed on this topic of assimilation is that our parents purposely decided to live in Spokane, Washington, which is a place that had a Black population that was less than 1% at that time.
A handful.
And so it's funny for me, it's taken me a lot of years to kind of parse through all of that and figure out, why Spokane, and why
I'm still asking,
my parents
Terri.
met my mom was from Louisiana. My dad was from Pittsburgh. They met in Los Angeles. And why did they decide to stay in Spokane, Washington? And, I thought about it over the years, and, it was hard because we were far away from family. We hardly ever saw our cousins and aunts and uncles. They would come and visit occasionally. We rarely would go visit them. I'm the youngest of 7. So, and I have to put in the plug for the fact that I grew up Black and Catholic in Spokane, Washington. And I'll come back.
Ditto here. So that's another parallel that we both enjoy. But interestingly enough, neither one of our parents chose to put us in Black churches.
Yes.
So that's another kind of assimilation intention on their part.
Yeah, we didn't have that either. We had like 1 or 2 churches, so we didn't have that. For real. Yeah.
Well, anyway, so just to wrap up very briefly the story. So I ended up going to Stanford University, which was a great experience. Went on to get my PhD at UCLA, was a professor, and then became vice provost at UT Austin. Was at University of Texas at Austin for 12 years. I did spend 4 years at University of Washington for my Washington State homies. But as at UT Austin for 12 years, came back to California to be the provost at Menlo College, did that for 3 years, and then now started my own company. So I've always had an entrepreneurial streak. So that's something I have always wanted to do. And so it's really important for me to have this opportunity in my life now.
Great. Wow. A lot of parallel. It's just interesting.
Yeah.
And did you two reconnect as a result of this series?
It was absolutely. So here's the interesting part of the story on this show. So I've said this a lot, just by admitting my Blackness, as though I could hide that, but just by admitting it, more opportunities and conversations about the subject have appeared. Yeah. And so my association with a particular group in the Seattle area is how Terri and I kind of ended up reconnecting in that manner as a result of being entrepreneurs and trying to make our way through this world as African-American business owners.
Yeah, I love that. And that's part of why we're doing the series, right? It's why we committed to it. What started, I don't know if Karen and Camilla shared with you, Terri, but what started off as just one opportunity to say, we really need to have a conversation. When Karen reached out and I said, of course, we felt there was so much value in just having these kinds of conversations where people can listen in and hopefully learn and grow as a result. We knew we wanted to commit to doing more and more of it. So thank you again for the opportunity to do that with this platform here. Could we start by defining for our listeners and Karen Nowicki, assimilation, right? Like the title that you guys chose, of course, was Assimilation, the great whitewashing of African Americans. I obviously can make some determination around what that means, but let's really get in there. What is assimilation and what does it mean by that subtitle?
But I got to jump in because assimilation is futile. Get the door.
Okay.
Well, I think that's what the listener's going to arrive to.
It's resistance is futile. You will be assimilated in the Star Trek fan.
Okay.
I couldn't resist. Okay, I'm back.
So Camilla, you start. So what does that word mean and why is it futile?
I was just joking because I'm a Star Trek
Come up
fan.
on that microphone.
I'm a Star Trek fan, so I have to go there. But anyway, to assimilate into a society that, growing up really didn't want you to be part of it. That is, for me, that's my 5-year-old experience. Okay, recognizing that you're not included in a society that really doesn't want you to be part of it anyway. So I'm like, when you're 5, what do you know when you're 5? You know a lot because you know what people are like. And it's like, okay, but their body language doesn't match what's coming out of their mouth. And, you just have to just get in there and throw the towel in, as my parents would say, and do what needs to be done. When you grow up in an all-white community, how does that look? You have to figure out how to fit in so that you don't stick out, but you stick out because the color of your skin, it just lights up the brightness, So that's what I'm going to say about that.
Karen, Terri.
Girl.
Yeah.
For me, for assimilation, I think a bit from my own experience, and it's pretty similar to what Terri's talking about. It's trying to fit in general. That's just what it is, trying to fit in. But the problem with assimilation is when you're trying to fit into a society that doesn't want you, you're constantly making judgments. And I don't mean judgments. Well, maybe I do mean judgments. You're constantly making evaluations of people and their intent. And it's very hard to make evaluations of people and their intent when you don't know them. So that changes your networking skills. I'll just throw that out there from a small business perspective. My networking skills as a result of assimilation, because most of the time when I walk into a networking group, I am the one. There might be a few other, but for the most part, it's a handful of us. And so just by what Camila said, that draws attention to myself. And just by the nature of who I am, I draw more attention to myself. But yet on the assimilation side, there's the conflict of me trying not to draw attention to myself. So put that together.
And all that's going on in here and in here.
Oh, yeah.
The in-head conversation.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because I consider that my superpower is being able to walk into a room and make everybody feel comfortable while being my authentic self. But that's something I've had to develop over 55 years. So, I wasn't there when I was in my 20s or 30s or even 40s. That's something I've developed more recently. And so the assimilation component is, and, Karen and I have talked about this, is that our parents they understood that for us to be successful, we had to be assimilated. Now, I'm not saying they had this conscious thought. They probably did, but I'm not sure. Yeah. My parents unfortunately passed away, so I can't ask them that for sure. They knew. I mean, my parents did not have. Despite the fact that both our fathers were in the military, our parents didn't know each other.
Nope.
And actually, we were all both on the
which
south
is surprising.
Of Spokane.
It's surprising, isn't it?
Well, my parents, they did not reach out to other Black families. Their friends were white, and. They had a lot of friends in our church. So we were at Sacred Heart Parish, but there was only one other Black family. Unfortunately, my parents, kind of felt like they had an air of superiority above other Black families, and they wanted us to, be assimilated into white society because they knew that that's what we were going to face when we got out into the world. And so, I used to kind of be very angry about the fact that, we didn't have, I felt uncomfortable sometimes in Black spaces. I didn't belong to the Black church, et cetera, et cetera. But I was going to mention, the book that really changed the way I frame all of this is Isabel Wilkerson's The Warmth of Other Suns, because she has a story in there about, I've read a lot about the Great Migration. But she has a story in there of a family, or a man who was a doctor and his wife, who left Louisiana to go to Los Angeles. And that's what my mother did. She was part of that generation that was part of the Great Migration. And their dream was, we are their dream, right? They wanted us to have an education. Yes. My mom only had an 8th grade education. She wanted us to be educated. She wanted us to have opportunities. And so, my grandfather was a sharecropper. And I'm a professor and a provost and an entrepreneur. This huge leap. And so, but, they felt that it was important for us to be able to talk a certain way, to be able to be comfortable in certain spaces. But what I have learned over time is not to diminish who I am as a Black person. And I want to make sure I mention code switching, right? Yes. We do this all the time. Yeah. And so, code switching is where it's so funny because my husband is white. And after we'd been together for a while, I said, Terri, you're really different when you're around your family. You talk different.
Yes, absolutely. I love it. Yes.
Yeah. Guess how I act when I'm with your family versus when I'm with my family.
Yes. I'm
Sorry.
Nope.
Anyway, so that's what we do, right? When we are able to, and that part of the problem, though, I think, is that we are the ones who are expected to adjust to this different situations. People aren't expected to turn around and try to understand me or have, my book is all about empathy. People aren't expected, sorry, I shouldn't say people, white people are not expected to have empathy for me and understand my life. And yet George Floyd changed all of that.
Yes.
For some reason. I don't know why it was George Floyd that was a tipping point that suddenly made white people say, oh, there's structural racism. Oh, wait a second. Black lives matter. Not all lives matter. Black lives matter because Black people are getting killed. I mean, we have yet another example.
Yes.
And I'm so proud of the NBA and the WNBA and all the athletes who are stepping up because everybody's finally getting it. And it's not like we haven't been fighting for this for hundreds of years. So, I don't want to diminish all the work that has been done up till now.
Oh, we've had many people come before us to lay that path. Amen.
Yep.
And I love that you're saying, finally, we don't know why George Floyd's murder finally landed us here, but thank God. And everybody's ready to listen. I'm going to assert that not everybody is ready to listen. I know you're saying that too. I hear the enthusiasm. I hear we're finally getting some traction and moving forward. And I'm going to speak. I don't know that they're going to be listening because they're typically not the people who would come to listen to this kind of conversation. But I'm going to speak to, my family and my friends who are, I see on social media, some who I'm very close to and some who, kind of like the two of you haven't connected with in years, but here we are on social media together. And that stance around all lives matter, or everybody riots and they can't understand it. And the inability or the unwillingness, I'm not sure what it is, to be able to step aside from all that we know or that I know as a white person and be able to look across the table or across the conversation and just for a few moments even, because I think even if you just sat there for a few moments and heard from either a dear friend or just someone in your community who's African American and just for a second imagine what it must be like to have to learn how to assimilate from the time you were born.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's who we're looking to appeal. Thank goodness we have enough people who are, I'm going to use a term that I really don't like at all, but as long as we have those woke people,
yeah,
I hate that term, but at least people are starting. Yes. But at least they're taking responsibility and saying, I'm ready to think differently and more globally. I'm ready to say, I probably don't know everything and I've been wrong.
Yeah.
It's just, it would be nice when you meet someone, or actually, after you meet them, they'll say, oh, well, she's so articulate. Oh, my.
Well, amazing what education will do for you.
I just don't understand, where that thought process comes from. As if we're not that.
People live in their own little circles. This is what I've discovered about COVID, and I'm a perfect example. COVID didn't change my life. Why? Because I have no children. Why? Because I have no significant other. I work from home. So guess what? The only thing that's changed in my life is me wearing a damn mask. Now I look like a mugger. I mean, so my world hasn't changed, but yet I can still relate to what it would be like to have a child at home or to have a significant other that I don't really care for. I mean, I get what that would be like. And that's what we're asking of somebody who does not have Black skin. We're asking you to think about what it might be like. And to the whole code switching, I had a boss who had said all kinds of things in the corporate world, but there was a couple things that he had said to me one time. I had a long-term boyfriend who didn't live in Phoenix. So his way to make up the difference was to send me ridiculous, large, gigantic bouquets of flowers. Sometimes twice a week, it was ridiculous, over the top. But it was what it was. But of course, as a man, my CEO he says to me one day, he says, geez, you must be totally different at home than you are here at work. Oh, exactly, Terri. Terri. Yeah. Yes, girl. If listeners, if you could see Terri's mouth right now, I don't know that her mouth could open any wider. And then she threw her hand over the top like she was going to make guttural sounds. So I'm just describing what I'm seeing.
So now let's open this up. What do you know his intention was, and what, if there was a conversation afterwards, what do you think he would pretend that it was? Because we've done this before when we've had conversations.
Yeah.
What did he intend to say?
I think what he was saying is, I don't like who you are here when you're at work, but somebody must like who you are at home because they're sending you flowers. That's my interpretation.
Mm-hmm. And he would likely argue that it wasn't a racist comment.
Oh, absolutely. He would say that it was not racist. I would never say a thing like that.
Yeah.
But it's sexist, if nothing else.
Okay, and we could walk that path too, Terry. Because I was thinking that. I just didn't want to say it. I'm glad you said it.
Yeah. No, it's totally sexist because, and I will add the race component because it's the angry Black woman trope.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. And I've shared stories.
I could tell stories. I mean,
we can't be passionate?
Yes.
Of course. For real. I mean, I'm passionate. I admit it. I'm passionate.
Well, here's the thing about identity when you assimilate. Sometimes when you assimilate, you lose people who are people of color lose their ability to have a voice.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that I have clearly never lost is my voice. But there are times I understand the economic cost of using my voice at a certain time. So I'm going to pick my battles. And we've kind of talked about this during the Angry Woman series that we did. And in that case, I think I probably just gave him a look like, get the hell out of my face. And that was probably that. Because what do you respond to somebody with like that? And that wasn't his first comment, but let's, those are the kinds of things that we as African Americans have to do. I've also been told that I'm quite intimidating. I'm 5'10", 118 pounds. Who am I scaring?
She's scary. I've heard that.
Come on, people. You know why I'm scary? Because I don't put up with shit. That's why I'm scary.
Yeah, we don't want to put up with your stuff.
I draw a firm line in the ground. And here's the difference between me and the three of us that are on the panel is my empathy factor. Thank God I'm around people with more empathy because my empathy factor drops off pretty quick. And I want to, and my logic comes in. And here's the perfect example. My logic comes in when we're having conversations about the latest assassination of a Black person. The conversation was, well, what difference would it make if it was 1 bullet or 7?
Oh, my. Well, his back was turned.
I'm gasping.
I don't understand. He should have just listened. Why couldn't he just listen more?
His back was turned and he had a knife. 7 bullets for a knife with a back turn? Where's your ego at when you have to respond like that?
It takes me back to New York City, 40 bullets, okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right?
Oh, there's so many stories like that. Yeah.
So that's the thing when I think about assimilation. I think, one of the reasons that Terry and I talked about this was, first off, you guys being white people don't realize we're having to do it. Yes. I think that's one of the things that makes me an incredible marketer is that I'm constantly observing people. I have to observe every aspect of you, not just what you're saying, what you're doing, how you're acting, how you're behaving, and how long you've been that consistent with that behavior. And I'm waiting for that moment when the tuning fork goes through my body, because you just said that one thing that makes me say, you're not authentic.
Yeah, as an actor, you have to, I observe people. So yeah, it's all about observation and looking at people. And when you create a character, it's like, wow, I can really create that.
But that's what we do.
Awesome.
We create characters.
Absolutely.
That's what code switching is. So I have a character that I am when I'm in an all-white space. I have a character that I am when I'm in a mixed race space. And I have a character that I am when I'm just with my family and I can let my hair down and just be myself, right? But, it's interesting you mentioned that, the intimidating factor. So, I've been a leader all my life. Going back to elementary school, I was class president and, through junior high as girls. I ended up going to Gonzaga Prep, the private Catholic school. And even there, I was able to become girls vice president, even though there were, out of 900 students, there were 9 Black students. But I was, so I've always kind of had this presence, this leadership presence. And don't ask me where it comes from. Somebody needs to do some kind of analysis.
I think it's out of necessity, Terry.
What's
you
that?
did it out of necessity.
Yeah, it's out of necessity. I agree.
Well,
Sometimes you
not
have to.
really.
You don't think so?
I wouldn't say it's a necessity issue because I have 4 sisters and they have some of that presence, and I'm not putting them down in any way. It's just, some of us are drawn to leadership, right?
Yeah.
And some of us aren't. Yeah. And, and there's different phases of life where you may, there have been points in my life when I didn't want to be that leader, and I kind of pulled back and said, I'm just, I look at my years at Stanford, and I had little flashes of it there, but when I was at Stanford, I really pulled back and said, I've been doing this since elementary school. I'm going to sit back and plus Stanford, everybody's been a leader. Everybody there was class president and all that. So I'm like, okay, I can relax. I don't have to be a leader here. I can just be.
But that's necessity. That's necessity.
Well, necessity and personality is what I hear you saying. Right?
Yeah. I'm saying it's a combination of because it was necessary for my, life process and getting to where I am today. But not everybody wants to be or needs to be a leader, really. Sure. And so there's that aspect of it, right? There's some of us who are drawn to it. And so in a sense, it's a necessity for me personally, but I don't think it's a necessity for everybody. And so what I would say is that, that presence I have, I thank my mother for it because she was one of the strongest women I will ever know in my life. It's basically being, and that's why I call it my superpower, because it's this ability to be fearless when you are in a white space, right?
Yeah.
And I'm judicious. I don't just say anything when I'm in those spaces, but I do push, I push where I can. And that's why, to me, empathy is important, because I try to put myself in the position of these other people. And I also try to get a sense of the room and, what can I get away with in this room? And I can tell you, there have been times when I've knocked the socks off of people. I remember when I was at UT Austin, I did a speech for the honors program. And, I talked about, I spoke directly to the women in that room, the girls, or whatever you want to call them, college students. And I said, you guys have to toot your own horn. The guys here are going to do it, but you guys have to learn to toot your own horn.
Absolutely.
We're the ones, we women are the ones who are dancing backwards in high heels. And I talked about some of my idols, Shirley Chisholm and Barbara Jordan. I've got my for those who are watching, I've got my Barbara Jordan.
All right now.
And she is like my ultimate idol of a strong Black woman who wasn't afraid to speak truth to power. If you don't know her story, she was part of the Watergate hearing. She's a congresswoman during Watergate. I get chills when I think of her speaking at the DNC.
She should be part of U.S. history, quite honestly.
She was powerful.
This is part of the problem in our country. Sorry to interrupt, Terri. Is that there's, and I know the education system inside and out, but is that the history that our generation has grown up with is woefully inadequate and does not share the real stories. And it would be one thing if we had the opportunity to take the whitewashed version of history and to take an African-American history course in high school. But if you don't even have those opportunities, at least, Terri, did you guys have Washington State history? I can't remember what they called it. So we had a Native American history course that we had to take as part of being in Spokane, Washington, which is all about Native American country. So I feel like that was at least an attempt. But why the hell don't we have one for African Americans? And why is it not in the system right now? I think that's what we need.
Because they're so afraid to tell the truth.
But the truth is now, and we need to tell it.
And the truth is now.
Well, you want to talk about whitewashing, the history. Oh my God. There's things so one part of my process of doing this book was learning more about my family's history and, digging in and I'm the family genealogist anyway, but so I decided, I was invited to University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa, and I have a very good friend there who is a professor of African-American studies, and he offered to take me on a tour of places like Birmingham and Montgomery and all the history there. And we went to the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, otherwise known as the Lynching Memorial. Yes. And, I was just doing this tour. I stopped in Atlanta to see, the MLK site and, went to University of Georgia, saw the Civil War stuff. So this was kind of a tour of the South. And just FYI, my mom came from Louisiana, but my grandfather on my dad's side came from Georgia. And he migrated to Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh. But anyway, I mean, we went to the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, and I'm thinking, oh, this is really interesting. I wonder, and then it didn't strike me until I'm halfway through this thing that, what if I see a relative here? And I had to look up. I knew my mom grew up in Opelousas, Louisiana. So I'm like, well, so it's they have these bars hanging down, and they have the name of people who were lynched by county. So there's all, so if you haven't seen it, go take a look at the website for the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. It's stunning. And so I'm walking through this very somber, and I think, oh, and I look it up and it says St. Landry Parish. Okay, well, we haven't gotten there yet. So let me go. It just so happened that St. Landry Parish was one of the last columns. And I go to it, and my mother's maiden name is Stelly. And what name do I see but Julian Stelly?
Wow.
I get chills today.
Oh, I got chills.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, and you don't understand how these things are going to touch you personally, right? And so I learned about Julian Stelly. He was murdered by the Ku Klux Klan in like 1898 because he was trying to vote. I learned about, there was actually a mass, it's funny, they're talking about all these massacres around, in the South, Oklahoma, et cetera. And there was a massacre in Opelousas, Louisiana in 1868 after the end of the Civil War. They think 300 people were killed. This is in Smithsonian Magazine. This isn't just
But it's
hearsay.
real history, and we need to start telling that history. This country has a lot to give into account of. Okay,
yes.
For its history. Black history is American history, and we need to start talking about that. Because I think, you talk about this monument, Terri, which is so amazing in its history. Every single white person needs to view that in and of itself, in person, up front, live and personal.
Part of the problem is that I was having this discussion with a friend the other day that we're ahistorical. I didn't really start to understand history until, strangely enough, I went to Europe. I did study abroad when I was at Stanford, and I went to France, and all of a sudden I was like, wait a sec, for these people, World War II is yesterday. It's, when I was growing up, World War II, and the whole, experience, I study European politics, so I've been back and forth. I mean, it's just, Europe is so infused with history, and we try to forget our history because there's so much negative in it. And we have to have this, American ideal that, we're the exceptionalism and all of that.
No, they want to remember the history that really, doesn't reflect in and of its truth. Okay.
Right.
Oppressive history.
Right. They get pick and choose the history that they want to remember. Okay. And that's what's the problem.
But I think I'm just going to do a little quick interruption, but I think that is the reason why these kind of conversations need to continue. And one of the reasons why we didn't do just one show, because there's so much to talk about that is currently not being shared. And in order to keep these conversations going, we have to get some sponsors. We have one more show after this that we have covered. We're looking for a premier sponsor and a handful of other kinds of sponsors to help us out. Please email me at Karen@NoMossBrands. If you are at all interested, we'll have some pitch kits and other information available. But you can see how much we need to continue to have these conversations because it's not in books. It's not being taught. Nobody's focusing on it. And until we get to the point where we can reform the education system, and maybe Terri can talk to us a little bit about that. Yeah. But until we can do that, it's shows like this that allow others to become aware.
Right.
I just sorry, Terri, real quick, and then I definitely want to hear what you had to say. I had this image just a second ago that really what we're doing, the three of us, and of course these incredible guests that we've had. I'm blessed with my relationship with Karen, have been for years, and have several other African-American people in my life. Camilla and I just know each other through this experience, which I'm so grateful for. What I just realized in this moment is for the many white people that don't have a friend who's African-American, when you listen in these conversations, we're giving you the gift of that experience. Is that weird for me to say that? But it just hit me that that's what we're doing.
But you're spot on, because a lot of white people have African-American friends. Let's get real.
It's 90. The actual statistic is the average white American had 91% of your social circle is white. And the other is filled with the Terrys and Karens and Camilas of the world.
Yeah.
We're the token.
So that's the gift in this series continuing. And I think it's been apparent you two were obviously there well before me, but I went, oh my gosh, as you were sharing, Karen, that's really what we're doing, having a chance to sit in and listen to just these conversations so that we can, again, step out of what I'm going to call our comfort zone. It's a weird way to phrase that. And begin to say, oh my God, underneath my little neighborhood that's just all white, there is this foundation and this structure created by the government and the people well before us that says it's supposed to be like that and keep us separate and segregated. So I apologize, Terri, for interrupting, but it was like one of those, oh my gosh, moments.
It's powerful though.
That's a perfect segue to what I want to talk about, because I mean, it's so funny. I had this discussion with a neighbor who was asking me, a white woman, about she's got her Black Lives Matter flag. And she's like, well, what can I do? I'm like, start by looking around you. Look at this neighborhood. Why did this neighborhood end up the way it is? There's a great book out there, that talks about how the government, helped to set up redlining, and real estate agents are complicit in keeping Black people out of these neighborhoods, loans, et cetera. Anyway, I can go
SATs.
on and on. But I want to come back to the education piece because, one of the things that I did when I was in, I was a big reader. So I love reading. Growing up, I did the majority of the time when I wasn't running track.
When she wasn't trying to beat me in long jump.
Yeah, exactly. I was there. But anyway, I have proof. But anyway.
I wasn't really a long jumper. I was a high jumper. Beat me there, girl.
I didn't do high jumps. It doesn't matter. But anyway, I went into our elementary school library and found the books on Martin Luther King and just Robinson and the first Black baseball player and Jesse Owens and all that. I had to do that reading on my own, and I sought it out. I went out and found as much as I could, and went to my sisters would take me to the library, and when I was even younger, and pick out books. But it's funny. My absolute favorite book as a kid was The Snowy Day, and if you know that book, it's one of the few kids' books from the 60s and 70s that had a Black character. Is a Black kid. It doesn't even, it has nothing to do with race, but it's a Black kid playing in the snow. Can you imagine how important that was for a kid from Spokane, Washington, who lived in the snow?
Right. Snow sucks, by the way.
So, it's fascinating. I still keep a copy of that book. And of course I had to get that for my boys. But so the education factor is critical here, right? I mean, I lived in Texas for 12 years. They're trying to manipulate the textbooks, to hide the history, to hide the Civil War, all of that. And so that's what people don't understand. We need these monuments. It's like, no, these monuments are obscuring history. That is the problem with the monuments, is they are obscuring history and, giving credibility to the narrative that, this was an honorable thing. I mean, these people were traitors to the United States of America. I mean, I remember being in Galveston one time, and I would, I'd see these guys in these big trucks, jacked up trucks, and they'd have an American flag and Confederate flag. And I'm just like, you don't understand the contradiction here?
Yeah.
This flag was saying, we want to break up the United States.
But they have such pride and honor in it, okay? They have such pride and honor in their Confederate flag. I don't understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you know what, though, Terri? It brings to mind one of the things that we've forgotten about, and by we, I mean a lot of us that have grown up and that are our generation, is you and I grew up with Northern Idaho being the Aryan Nation center. And Aryan Nations. I mean, like, I remember worrying about the skinheads when I'd go to Athol, Idaho, to go to Silverwood, to the amusement park. I mean, these are the things that as kids you just grow up knowing that exist. Yeah. But most people have forgotten about the Aryan Nations. But the Aryan Nations were skinheads that were part of our world our entire time we were growing up there.
Yep. And again, not something that I've ever had to consider or think about. I was aware of, but it was basically growing up. That's not my problem.
Yeah.
Naively. Right?
But that's the stuff that's not in books, though. That's the stuff.
In books.
And here's the other part of it. It doesn't need to be in books. It just needs to be part of a curriculum. I'm not even an educator, and I know that much.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I get the privilege to teach, finance on the other half of my brain in higher ed. Okay. And people's like, you do both? Yeah, I do both.
You have to.
But you have to. You know what I'm saying? You have to be engaged in the process of life. and where you're headed. And part of that is education. And so the privilege that I get to be in that position to be able to teach, too much is given, much is required and expected.
Ooh, that's good.
Yes, I agree with that. And I that's why I wrote my book, right? I mean, first of all, it was a chance for me to kind of dig in and understand my family history and all of that. But, the second component was the sense of responsibility that our generation has.
We do.
I mean, it's so funny because I'm watching what's going on. And I'm like, okay, I have to step back and let this younger generation, do what they need to do. But on the other hand, we also need to give them some guidance.
Yes.
We have a lot of experience and that we can offer. And so that's why I do what I do. I mean, even with the Center for Higher Education Leadership, I mean, a big part of it is helping faculty to understand what it means to be a leader and, get into administration. But a lot of it is about diversity. I want more women. If we don't get more women and minorities into higher education, then we're just hypocrites.
Yep. And we need to do that. Yep. We do.
Yeah. And how do we do that? How do we do that?
First of all, you have to, and I will tell you how to do it. You start with the board of directors. If you don't have, or trustees or regents, if you don't have a board that understands the importance of diversity, then you're not going to get a president who understands. Basically, it has to be part of our performance, right? If we were talking, I just did a webinar today. So if you want to check it out, I'll send you guys the link. We did a webinar just about diversity, equity, and inclusion in higher ed. And, it takes having people who leaders to start with. I mean, a lot of these issues come up from the bottom. So for example, we were talking to James Moore from Ohio State, the Ohio State University, and they've had a diversity office for 50 years. And why have they had a diversity office for 50 years? Because the students demanded it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it's about the students.
When the students and the parents step up and say, and we're becoming the majority, between Hispanic and Black, and we are becoming the majority. And the demographics show we are the ones who are coming into these colleges, and we have to demand these things, right? And that's what's happening right now. People are saying, we need this, and we need the board, we need the president, we need the provost, we need the deans. Every single one of them have to be responsible, and it needs to be measurable. We need data. I want to see every number you have that shows me that you're making progress on these issues. I want to see, the graduation rates for Black students in this country is a travesty. I mean,
shameful.
A total, absolute travesty. And we were just talking about Black women have the highest level of student loan debt of any group.
I did not know that.
Yes, I didn't know that either. But it's true.
It's all in the numbers.
Go to the AAUW, American Association of University Women. We were talking to Kim Churches, their CEO, and I looked at and I was just like, oh my God, I had no idea that Black women had the highest level of student loan debt
to make
in this
52
country.
cents on the dollar. Isn't that what it is? 52 cents. Isn't that the equivalent? Black women to white men.
Yeah.
So we're getting all this education. I myself have 9 years of higher education, which is multiple degrees and a master's. Terri, we don't have time to list all Terri's accomplishments. You're sitting right here with 4 highly accomplished women that are here with the idea to what can we do to shift the world.
If I didn't go to the late great Matt Hightower and say, hey, Matt, who's teaching this basic accounting course? I would not be where I am today. It's taking that initiative to insert yourself into places where you feel like you fit in and where you can contribute. And so for me, it was asking him, who's teaching that? And at the time, I was a minority fellow of Three Rivers Community College. And what a great experience that I had just by initiating myself into that space. And the type of, support that I was given as a, minority fellow and as a new faculty member. So you can also just insert yourself in there and see where you fit in. Sometimes we have to do that.
And keep inserting, right?
Exactly.
If you get
Being
that no,
consistent.
right? If we get the no, and we can make an assumption that we just have to stay small, we have to quiet our voice, as you each express you had to do in different times of your life. Keep putting yourself out there and find the right opportunity to get to that next level of influence. It's funny, as we're talking about this, I'm on a handful of nonprofit boards, and I was just thinking, I was in a meeting yesterday via Zoom, and I'm looking at, all the Zoom little cubes and it was we're all Caucasian. We're all white Americans, men and women. So that at least there was a balance there. But I thought I have a responsibility to help change that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we all do.
And boards of directors of companies. I mean, we're in the business world. Look, I mean, it's so frustrating because I'm out here, I'm available, I've got business expertise. Nobody's. I've been on 10 nonprofit boards, but nobody's asking me to be on the board of directors of a company. Why?
Exactly.
For God's sake, I've got a PhD. I ran a business college. What more do I have to do?
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's the piece that people don't understand, because what I find with my circle of friends, and this is a circle of friends that go back to Spokane, that they say, but we see you as very successful. And in my head, I'm like, ah!
But that goes back to your comment earlier around, she's so well spoken or so articulate. What does that mean? Of course you are.
It's such a, I just get so tired of hearing it. It's like the ignorance just comes out of their mouth and they don't even realize what they're saying. You know what I'm saying? As if we are not an articulate people.
Well, that's where, isn't that when it comes to foundationally or structurally, when we talk about structural racism, that's where it started at its foundation, the belief or the thought that somehow Africans were less than.
Yeah.
And that's just carried on throughout.
Yep.
But you have to just look at it and say, no, this is not the way. Both of my parents were nurses. Both of them, my mother and my father. And the amount of service that those two people gave to their community with very little respect from a community of people. Okay. I'm so thankful for my parents because they gave me the wisdom, the strength, and the knowledge to understand who I am and where I come from. I don't even know my family history, but I know my history, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? And so it's important that we institute ourselves into those hard to reach places as people of color, because if we don't do it, they're not going to ask. Okay. And now they're going to ask because they want a token on their board, and I'm not about to do that. So
African Americans are really lousy tokens because we have voices.
Exactly.
We're not quiet.
She's so outspoken.
Yeah. I mean, and I do insert myself into those spaces, but it's really interesting. I was asked to be join this group of CEOs in the Bay Area. And, of course, it's all male. They're all white. They're like, we need a Black woman.
Yes.
So they're trolling LinkedIn and they find me and I'm like, I went to one meeting and I'm like, well, this is interesting, but you know what? I'm just not feeling like being the token right now.
Yeah, right.
That way to them. But, I was just like, I need a break from that right now. Maybe I'll join later when I'm feeling less, frustrated. But, it's like, and, it's not that I don't, I appreciated their wisdom. It's a supportive environment for the, running a business, but it's just like,
But show me your truth.
But can I say something about that? And this is a sincere question. If not Terri in that, and you step away, which I totally respect and get it, right? If we're not feeling it, we're not feeling it. But if not Terri, then who? Because then what happens for groups like this, and I'm pretending, so correct me and just, whatever. Then they'll go, oh, well, she didn't want to be here anyway. Well, we tried and off we go on our merry way, and we don't have that opportunity. So it's
show me your truth.
Yeah.
They need to show the truth. Okay.
But they can't ask us to do it for free.
Right.
Exactly.
I mean, the bottom line.
Not only for free, but these guys want me to pay to join their organization.
Shut up.
Yeah. I considered telling them, if you let me join for free, I'll join, but I didn't even want to do that. So.
But they are all paying too, or no?
Oh yeah, they're all paying.
I know, but see, this is my point. First off, all this education, all this business experience, and we can't get even a board, much less a paid board position. I'm not giving away my shit for free anymore. That's the difference. Is like, at some point, we as leaders have to draw the line. And I think that's kind of what Terri did
they
in
get
that
paid
scenario.
for this stuff, right? I mean, for real. Yeah. They get paid for what they do on a board. So, let's get real.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying. Terri also has an interesting kind of, I wanted to, if we have time to kind of get into this a little bit about what you're experiencing, because you have 2 teenage Black sons, and you also have one with some some special needs that COVID has really challenged, and how the challenges that you have had as an education expert trying to work within the system that you live in, the school district that you live in.
Yes. So I have 2 boys. They're actually mixed race, but they're dark skin.
They're black
like
as far
me.
as the world cares.
Yes.
As far as the world cares, and they identify as black. And so my older son's actually in college, and he's loading up his car today. He's heading up to Lewis and Clark College. In Portland. And so I'm
Thank you again for being here.
Yes.
Yes. And then my younger son, Brandon, and he doesn't mind. We talk about he's got ADHD. And so he doesn't mind. We talk about it. He was the kind of kid who had ADHD so he had the same kindergarten teacher as my son, Andrew. And Andrew was he was very well behaved. Well, Brandon, it's not that he wasn't well behaved. At the end of that kindergarten year, his teacher came to me, and who we adore. She's the best kindergarten teacher ever. But she's like, Terri and Mike, your son, in my 20 years of teaching, your son has the most energy of any child I've ever taught. 20 years.
I know, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
But even better, his basketball coach, who had no connection with his kindergarten teacher, exact same thing.
Shut
20
up.
years of coaching, she had never had a kid with so much energy.
You're like, I know.
Well, it's hard to know when, but no, we had, even before he was, we took him in when he was 6 to get assessed. Even before that, we had to have we had a little mini trampoline in the house. So and it was like when we could see him getting wound up, Brandon, go bounce. And, my kids spent a lot of time in Europe growing up because I was going over there for research trips. And so their vacations were, okay, we're hopping over to Paris, or we're going to Berlin, or going to London. So one year, the year before, he started first grade, we went on a trip, and oh my God, that was just so eye-opening. That was right after I'd heard from his kindergarten teacher. And this kid, we would be walking, we'd spend all day walking around Paris, and, we'd be walking back to we would rent an apartment, and I'd be like, okay, Brandon, go run up and down those stairs. And I mean, I had to work so hard to get him tired out to go to sleep at night. I mean, we would have, okay, Brandon, go run, run around this fountain, whatever it took. Because this kid would just, we'd get back, and we were all exhausted, and he's still wound up. And one of my other favorite stories was we went to Disneyland. And, my older son and I, we got tired out, and my husband, he's got a lot of energy too, but he and Brandon stayed out for another couple. I mean, my feet were so sore, and they stayed out for another couple of hours going on rides and all this stuff. I was like, oh my God. So anyway, but it's, since he got diagnosed early, we've had him on medication. He's done relatively well, but then COVID hit.
Yeah.
And then, in the spring, they went completely online, they didn't have a schedule. So it was all asynchronous. Like, okay, here's your assignments, just do them. And
Doesn't
he
work
just,
that way.
It crash and burn. So I said, okay, this was an emergency. We'll move on. So, now I'm not fighting, but I have in 6 minutes, I have a 504 meeting for my son. But I'm amazed at how hard I have to push to get him.
You have to advocate.
Sorry, my phone was.
I heard somebody.
Your phone's talking to you.
Yeah, Terri, I have a 28-year-old that had Asperger's, and I had to hire an educational advocate.
Yes.
Just to get them to do their job.
Yes, that's what I'm facing.
$300 an hour. I had to hire an educational advocate to get them to do their job.
Yeah, no, I talked to a lawyer.
But the hard part is what we're missing, and the part that we're not sharing with the listener is the institutional racism in education. You have a black boy who is acting behaviorally not destructive, but with all that energy. Thank God he had a great kindergarten teacher, because normally he would be tossed aside, and that would be the end of him.
Yeah, but I had to fight for my son the same way.
That's exactly it.
They tried to toss him aside. I'm like, you're not going to do that. This is what you're going to do. And I had to hire educational advocate. I had to get, all of these things to get him a 504 point and all those kind of other things that you have to do for your children. Advocating for your children is top priority. Okay,
well,
and the people that sit on
that's the reason I'm
yes,
that's the reason I'm proactive, is because I know he had great teachers throughout elementary school, and middle school was for the most part okay, and high school is just a whole nother world, right?
Yes, it's tough.
It's a little harder, but I am emailing his teachers every week and saying he needs this, this, and this. He's not getting the assignments done. You got to give him more time, and I'm sure they mean well. They're good people, but they don't understand their structure, the structural racism they're living in, right? And I have to, and I'm not just advocating for me and my son. I'm trying to advocate for all of these parents. I'm actually on the board of an organization, Foundation for College Education, where we have kids who have 504 plans, and so I'm sharing everything I'm learning with the staff there, and and we all. This is the thing. We all have to work together to make sure these kids are getting what they need at a time when the school districts are stretched so incredibly thin, but this is their job. And I will not let go of this. I'm going to be a pit bull and not let go of this because it is their job. I don't care if you're in a friggin' pandemic.
Yes.
I expect my son to get what he needs.
Because they would certainly do it for other students, and I'll tell you that.
Well, and how many parents aren't in a position with the knowledge and the experience that you have to be a voice for those families, right? The COVID and this quarantine and the fact that our kids are doing school online. I have a 13-year-old at home right now, engaged in his middle school classes. I thank God that I've only got one. Yeah. And I thank God he's as, grounded as he is to be able to take himself through the courses and not lose any of that educational time. But I think about the many families who don't even have the Wi-Fi or the internet. They don't understand. They haven't had computers in their homes, and they're both parents or one parent.
Machine for 5 kids.
Right. I mean, it's really this divide has been created.
Educational resources that that need to go across the board for our children to be educated. For what they need.
Yep.
And that's one of the biggest inequities and inequalities in our system right now. And that is what's impacting us and the ability to move forward in this country is that we're not giving equal education. We're not giving Black boys and girls the opportunity that we're giving white kids.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we could talk about. We need to have a whole nother session.
Bring it. It's so funny. Every time we have a guest on this series, our guest ends with that note. And on that note, I want to be respectful of your time because I want to make sure you get to your next meeting. Could you please let our listeners know where they can follow you and stay in touch with you? And you mentioned that the book is already available for pre-order. Why don't you end on that note? And if you have to scoop before we close out the show, we'll let you do that, and then we'll talk about sponsorship and that sort of thing afterwards.
Yeah, I'm actually good because the teachers are always late to be here.
Truth. As a former teacher, I can say that's true.
Terri, I can say
the book is available from the publisher and on Amazon. Radical Empathy, Finding a Path to Bridging Racial Divides. So my company is higheredleads.com. We're actually in the process of a rebrand, but if you want to get on our mailing list, please join in. I'm at www.terrigivens.com. And I'm also, I spend a lot of time on Twitter. And so I'm just at Terri Givens. And then I'm also on Facebook. I have facebook.com/Scholar Givens.
Or you can just go to my No Moss Brands thing and all her links are in there.
Yeah. So, but I'm on social media a lot. So if you want to connect and talk about anything we've talked about, please reach out. And we will be happy to, especially I have a team, the Center for Higher Education Leadership. We can tell you all about what we do. So yeah, don't hesitate to reach out. It's so funny because now all of a sudden I'm running into all these friends from Spokane. I was doing a webinar this morning, and another friend from Spokane who I went to Libby Junior High, a friend we haven't talked in 50 years, almost 40 years. But another person said, Terri, we were on the track team.
Right.
Libby. Anyway, so it's this weird synchronization with the universe where I'm running into these people.
But so you can fill in the holes.
I probably should get going.
Thank you.
This has been fantastic.
Thank you. Can we do, it's kind of
Terri.
weird, but since we're recording on video as well, can we all just pause and smile for a second and we'll let Terri go. So just smile so I can come back and freeze frame it. For our listeners live, they're like, what the hell are they doing? Terri, thank you again. We'll be in touch with this podcast.
Terri.
Great to be with you.
Yes, wonderful.
Thank
Have
you
a great
so
day.
much.
Oh my gosh. Thank you.
Stay cool.
I know, right?
Impossible here in Arizona. Oh my gosh. Another great conversation. Yeah. For those of you listening, we do encourage you to go back to the other episodes that we've had, if you would please, and engage in the conversation with us. If you have a suggestion for who you'd like to see us bring on as an expert or someone with, personal experience or a combination of both, we'd love to have you connect them with Karen at No Moss Brands. That's Karen at No Moss, MOS brands.com. And again, our purpose here is to bring together the right people in the right balance to have these delicate conversations surrounding racism in small business and, of course, the arts. Every show provides the perspectives of both sides of the color spectrum. This is a place where the comfortable come to be uncomfortable through the expansion of one's perspective. And we do hope that you'll continue to join us. And for those of you listening who are in a position with the opportunity to help sponsor these series, we're looking at obviously either a government position or a large enterprise or a small business, somebody who's affiliated with the arts and that's important to them. Anybody who cares. How's that? Our packages are very reasonable and it will help give us the wings beneath our wing, or the wind beneath our wings as it relates to this particular series. Sound effects.
Hi, neighbor. Can you say sponsor?
Okay, ladies, I'm going to let you do it next time.
We're a little too giggly today.
I love it. And again, you can reach out to Karen at nomossbrands.com for more information on the sponsorship, because as Karen Loomis did mention, this is, we have one more segment that's already been taken care of, and we'd love to see these conversations continue. So on that note, anything else you guys want to end with? I would love to hear maybe just a thought. What from the two of you are you coming away with in this opportunity to share this hour with Terri?
You know, it's such a privilege to share in space with people with like-mindedness and grace and humility. And I think, you know, that's something that Terri brings to the table, so much more of that. So it's nice to meet new people that understand that humility and empathy is truly key. You have to be empathetic with all people because we all come to the table with so many different ideas and how we grew up. And when we have empathy, we can actually put ourselves aside and see that person for where they come from. So that's my comment for today. So thank you.
My takeaway is kind of the same in the fact that once you put something out there in the universe, it's amazing how things come back. And so the fact that I am now willing to talk about being Black in America, I've realized so much more and learned so much more about myself and how I'm not alone in the experiences that I've had that I attributed strongly just to my own poor performance, which in my mind, I don't have a poor performance, but that's what happens when we keep things all bottled up and inside and don't share with others. And so please continue to join us when we have these valuable conversations, because we're being vulnerable with the listener so that we can help you understand a little bit more.
So good. Thank you again, ladies, for being part of this with me and giving me the opportunity to use this platform for this. You've been listening to Phoenix Business RadioX, broadcasting live from within the Max 6 Conscious Workspace studio. Some media leans left, some lean right, and we lean business and arts. Until next time, this is Karen Loomis. Thank you again for listening.